time for the mailbag. I did promise to get to it. Sorry it took a little bit longer than anticipated. First up, TJ. Who will have a bigger bounce back year, Jaylon Smith or Anthony Brown? Well, it's a no-brainer for me. It's Jaylon Smith. Smith, I think, looks really, really good right now. Anthony Brown, not so much. Let's just call it inconsistent. Smith, I think, is going to play a key cog in this Cowboys defense. You'll see him blitz more as well. He is going to be a starter for the Cowboys. A middle linebacker or strong side linebacker. Hopefully, Sean Lee, of course, plays all 16 games. But for me, it's an obvious Jaylon Smith. Next up from Anthony, and, well, quite a few on these. No surprise here. Anything new in trading for Earl Thomas? Anything? There is not. There is no progress on an Earl Thomas to the Cowboys trade. And I want to make note of this as well because I keep hammering this point home, and some, mainly you non-Cowboys Report watchers, don't seem to get it. This is not up to the Cowboys. This is not a decision that the Cowboys say, oh yeah, we'll pick up the phone and we'll go trade for Earl Thomas. This is between the Seahawks and Earl Thomas. If Seattle wants to trade Earl Thomas, they'll call the Cowboys. There's nothing that Jerry Jones can do beyond offering a first pick, which he's not going to do, to get the Cowboys to trade for Earl Thomas. It's not in Dallas's hands. Instead, it's all dependent on Seattle. So, folks, let me know if you want Dallas to go get Earl Thomas, especially in light of the Xavier Woods injury, which brings us to our next question. Namely, with all the injuries to the safeties, would it be more possible and beneficial for the Seahawks to force the Cowboys to try and trade for someone like Earl Thomas, i.e., does injuries make it more likely? And again, an Earl Thomas trade, folks, does not depend on the Cowboys calling the Seahawks. It is completely up to right now Seattle and GM John Snyder saying, you know what, we're not going to extend Earl Thomas. We're done with the holdout stuff. Let's pick up the phone and try and trade him. Seattle hasn't done that. All right. Yeah, injuries could increase the asking price, but not Seattle's desire to go trade away Earl Thomas. So there's nothing for the Cowboys to do right now but sit and wait for ET. Now, if and when that changes, of course, we'll let you know. But as of right now, there really isn't anything of note beyond the fact the standard updates that nothing has really changed so far for the Cowboys, Earl Thomas, and the Seattle Seahawks. Bray wants to know if I see the Cowboys trading for anyone besides Earl Thomas. I would make note of an offensive lineman, I hope, and maybe even an interior defensive lineman as well. Demetrius asks, would you rather trade for an okay player at safety or an interior offensive lineman for depth? Can I pick both? Is that an option? Because I don't like where either situation fits right now in terms of the overall depth for the Cowboys. We'll start at defensive back, and if Heath, Woods, and Frazier are healthy, okay, I'm comfortable enough, I guess, relative to where they are without Xavier Woods or where they are right now. You cannot enter week one of the preseason with Jeff Heath, Kavon Frazier, and a bunch of dudes off the street on the depth chart right now, because that's where they're at right now. You cannot do that. So, and hamstring injuries, by the way, tend to linger. So go sign somebody via a roster cut, a trade. Give me somebody else out there at safety, because right now it is not good enough. The same is true, though, for the offensive line. We've seen how bad it is with the second and third string. And right now, you at least have the possibility, I don't think it's all that likely, that Frederick and Zach Martin are going to be banged up for week one. All of a sudden, you're starting Tyron Smith, Connor Williams, Lael Collins, Kadeem Edwards, and Joe Looney. That's gross. That's a surefire way to have Zeke limited production, had to get Dak Prescott hurt. So you better find, I think, both in reality. In terms of which I think they'll address more likely, I think it'll be the offensive line. I think you'll see the Cowboys be it roster cuts or even a last-second trade before the season starts to get somebody in there, because you don't want Chaz Green on that roster, and you need more depth overall. Folks, if you like the shirt that I'm wearing, you can get one of your own at Mizzen and Main. Comfortable.af is the website. It is the most comfortable dress shirt you will ever own. All right, next up on my mailbag, Film Productions wants to know who are the top 3 cities that I would go trade for. No Earl Thomas side. Well, Phil, I went a little bit further here. I picked out 5 guys for you. As I've said before, Derek Kindred makes sense as a box safety. Miles Killebrew kind of fills that same role. I'll throw out a guy like Quentin Rollins, who might get cut by the Packers, can play almost any spot. Nickel corner, some outside corner, some safety, some dime linebacker. Injuries have been a problem for him, but there's some upside there. Obi Melifonwu is probably my ideal target. He hasn't done much for Oakland, has been banged up as well, but I don't know if Oakland would actually trade him away. And if so, how expensive would it be? Bennett Jackson, I'm trying to find a 5th guy there. I had a Bengals guy in there, funny enough, and then they cut George Loco, so I took that off the list there. But Bennett Jackson has some cornerback experience, could maybe be a special teams guy, but overall, it's tough to find quality backup safeties because for the most part, teams don't cut those guys. So Kindred makes the most sense to me if Cleveland is willing to give him away. From Sloan now, if the Xavier Woods injury is severe, who are the third and the fourth safeties as of right now? First off, great question. As I've hinted at, in terms of free safety, it is Tyree Robinson, the undrafted rookie out of Oregon. Has looked the most competent of the undrafted guys so far, I think, among the defensive backs at safety. Maybe Jerron Johnson takes over as the number 4 at strong safety, but my hope is that it's somebody else not on the roster because I don't like where the Cowboys sit at depth at safety. All right, Jordan wants to know if there are any free agent offensive linemen worth a look right now. Mentions Richie Incognito. I'll put him on this list here, but I'm treating Richie like the Grinch. I'm not touching him with a 6-foot pole. He also just got arrested again today because, well, he's kind of the head case out there. You can throw out a guy like a Zane Beadles who has kind of fallen away by the wayside in recent years. Alex Boone, I wouldn't mind. Jahari Evans would be my first choice, but he wants to be a starter only. He won't come back for a backup job, I don't think. So if Martin is actually seriously injured, maybe it's Evans, but I don't think it's all that likely. And I've seen some people throw out the name Luke Jokel, which, I mean, you can bring him in, but he's kind of, at this point, Chaz Green, who was drafted higher. That's kind of what Luke Jokel has become in the NFL. Folks, today's show is brought to you by The Guild. If you're going to come visit me and the Cowboys for a game, you got to stay with The Guild. Go to stayguild.com, promo code CHATSPORTS for 15% off your next stay. They're kind of like a luxury Airbnb. All right, time to talk Rico Gathers because, well, of course we're going to talk Rico on today's mailbag. Derek wants to know, doesn't know why the Cowboys didn't bring back Rico last year. Says he knows the blocking is an issue, but the season was a bust midway through. And he says if they keep 3 tight ends, I don't see any way they keep Schultz over Gathers, and is still scratching his head over the pick used on Dalton Schultz. Derek, I like you, but there's a lot of revisionist history going on here. For starters, the season was not a bust midway through. The Cowboys were in the playoff hunt until Week 16. They were up in it all the way. Namely, Rico Gathers, I think, for starters, not getting pulled up off the practice squad or coming back from injury was his wake-up call. I don't know if he took it as seriously as he maybe should have. So that was a big issue there for the Cowboys overall at tight end. Dalton Schultz, let's not revise history and say that, oh, this was why the Cowboys decided to get rid of Rico. Like, they needed a tight end. That was a quality selection. It's not a matter of Rico versus Dalton. But Dalton Schultz was a good pick. We'll see how he develops, but there were not many tight ends. I saw one guy say Dalton Schultz was a 6th-round pick. No, he wasn't. He was one of the last reliable tight ends on the roster. So it wasn't a battle there between, oh, they shouldn't have taken Dalton Schultz. And for Rico, it's not just the blocking. The pass catching, upside-wise, is the best on the team. But the other issue for Rico is that it's not just the blocking that's an issue. There are times, and Jason Garrett has said it, Jerry Jones has said it, stop calling me a hater. This is the reality right now for Rico Gathers. There are times he still doesn't quite understand the nuances of football. And that's not a big surprise because it's really tough for a player who hasn't played football in a long time to get the blocking assignments into, oh, the front has changed. How do I adjust? So I'm taking Schultz over Rico on this roster, and I think the Cowboys are as well right now. But in reality, why not both? Demetrius wants to know who is making the team, Noah Brown or Rico Gathers. Might not be either of them. Noah Brown can't get on the field, and it's tough to make a team when you're not healthy. And then for Rico, as I've said many times, the Cowboys staff doesn't seem to love him. Next one up here from Film Productions. If I can only keep one, am I keeping Lance Lenoir or Rico Gathers? Give me Rico. I kind of think Lance Lenoir is just a guy. Rico can be more than a guy. Maybe Lance helps you out more right now on special teams, but I would rather have Rico on my roster. So there are a couple guys, I think, fighting for a last roster spot, 2, 3 of them or so. Noah Brown, Lance Lenoir, you can throw in Deontay Thompson as well. Mike White, Rico Gathers, and Darius Jackson. Look, I would put Rico on this roster because he can help you out so much in the passing game. But the Cowboys coaching staff doesn't feel the same way. James wants to know if I'll stop talking if Rico becomes the next Gates. No, I'll probably either be A, happy that he's on the roster with the Cowboys, or B, angry that he's on a different team right now. Mark wants to know if the Cowboys still believe in Chaz Green's upside, how can they not believe in Rico Gathers' upside and potential? Does it make sense from a talent evaluation standpoint? Well, I think the Cowboys are about done on Chaz Green and his upside there. As for Rico, look, it's a trust issue. And Rico hasn't developed the way that they've wanted him to do so far. In the end, though, Chaz Green, I don't think is making this roster, so at least that's a good thing, right? All right, Kelvin Bay wants to know, if Paxton Lynch gets cut by Denver, will the Cowboys sign him? I could see it. The Cowboys did like Lynch coming out, but he has not been the guy anyone thought he was going to be. He's been a complete bust for Denver. Yeah, Dallas almost moved up to get him. And by the way, how funny could it have been? The Cowboys wanted Paxton Lynch. They didn't get him. They wanted Connor Cook. They didn't get him. And instead, they got the best quarterback by far out of all three in Dak Prescott, who was at most their third option there. So lucky break there for the Cowboys, right? But the issue for Lynch in Denver, he actually costs more money to cut him. So it might be a moot point, but I don't think it would happen anyway. Marcelo B asks that he prefers Rush over Bridgewater in a situation. Asks, why do you keep two backup quarterbacks on the 53-man roster? Well, namely, because you might get lucky again. What happens if Mike White or Cooper Rush actually develops into a good player? It is so much more valuable to have a quality backup quarterback than, a fourth tight end, for example, upside-wise, even if that guy is Rico. So that's why they'll keep three. I don't know if they'll keep Mike White. He hasn't looked all that good in the preseason. And Jordan wants to know, do we see Gallup starting week 1? I don't know if he'll come out with the starters, but Gallup will see plenty of playing time in week 1. Maybe not a full-on starting role, but he's going to be actively involved.